thank you guys so much for joining. We have a very large group on the call today, so that's wonderful. For those of you that haven't started yet, we have the chat going over on the side. I don't know where it shows up on your screen, but there's a chat box. Feel free to enter comments or questions through that at any time. We are going to stop a few times throughout the webinar to do questions, but please don't hesitate, while they're fresh in your mind, definitely get them up there. Like Kathy said, we are recording this, so it'll be available afterwards. Something that I heard as a feedback from last year, and I apologize, I can't remember which region it was, but one of the regional fellows POCs required their folks putting in for fellow to go back and review the webinar at some point. So I really appreciate that. And again, that's what this is for. So thank you guys very much. So just to give you just a little bit of background and a little bit of information about today, we have an hour scheduled. We do not have an hour's worth of webinar to go through. I think if we went through it nonstop with no questions, we'd be looking at 20, 30 minutes at most. So I really want to use the time for questions, make sure you guys are good, feeling good about this by the time we hang up. One of the things that I just kind of wanted to share with you, as a lot of you know, we've done this webinar every year, many, many years. And really, the executive committee, which is made up of the Academy of Fellows chair, deputy, and vice chairs, we work the fellows nomination process pretty much all year. We start in January with an after action review, and then we go into revisions, looking at the actual nomination form. Is information right on the website? We move into the webinar and then the actual process. We have notifications out by December 31st, and then we start all over again. So we are looking at this language so often. The webinar is really a way to just convey to you, hey, this is what we think we said in writing. This is what we intended. This is what we mean for it to say. So again, just to make sure that everybody's clear, any questions at all that you have, we want to make sure that we can answer those. And really, we're going to try and cover everything today in the webinar, but do not hesitate to reach out at any time. We really do, want to make the process as easy as we can for folks. So whatever questions we can do, whatever, your situation is, definitely reach out to Kathy Off or myself, and we'll make sure that we get things taken care of. So before we jump into the slides, I'd like to turn it over to Mark Handley, our Academy of Fellows chair. Mark, did you have anything, general remarks or anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, Ann, thanks very much. And just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, because I know I was muted before. All right, that's great. Okay, hey, thanks everybody for joining. Again, my name is Mark Handley, and I'm honored to be the chair for the Academy of Fellows this year. And I will tell you that, first of all, my hat's off to Ann for putting all this together. And as she says, they work it all year round, and it's clear that what you will see today is a culmination of what Ann and the Academy of Fellows has been working on and improving upon every year. And I know from actually being a fellow and nominating people in the past, this type of presentation really does help, as Ann said, really fills in the gaps in what the intent is as we go forward, because we have set forth an objective process for, obviously that takes some subjectivity and some judgment involved as well. And each one of you on here, whether you are a regional fellow POC, a nominator, or a future fellow nominee, this will provide you some great information. And I will just tell you also that, the Academy of Fellows, our executive committee, our primary objective is to really bring in a strong and vibrant cadre of new fellows every year. And that really is to help strengthen our society. And so your participation in this process is key. Everyone who's on here has a key role in bringing that forward. So as Ann said, this is intended to help guide nominators, the regional fellow POCs, and the nominees through that process. So please, if you have questions and whatnot, please, put them in the chat, ask them through here. As Ann said, we probably have about a half hour most worth of material, but that leaves plenty of time if you have questions as we go through this. Many of us have been through this process before. It can be a little bit daunting when you first look at it, but I will just say that some of the improvements that the Academy has made over the last several years with having draft nominations due and reviewed and feedback, I think make it a much more manageable process for the nominees and the nominators going through there. So with that, again, I thank you for joining the webinar today, and it is all about making us a strong and vibrant society, and fellows are a key element to it. So thank you for joining us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ann.
Great, thanks. Okay, Kathy, let's move on to the next slide, please. So one more thing, there's a lot of information in these slides. And just please don't be offended if you ask a question and I tell you to hold on, it's in the next slide. Again, I think we have it all in here. There's a lot to cover. So this first slide, again, we will go through this in more detail at the end of towards the end of the presentation. But for now, just to give you an idea of the timeline, this is very, very similar to what we did last year. Dates are slightly revised. So August 3rd, nominators 50% packet is due to your regional fellows point of contact. The regional fellows point of contact has a huge role in the nomination process. So thank you in advance to everybody who is filling that role or has filled that role. Those folks have a very key part in this. 50% draft, so that's pretty subjective. The intent of this, I'll just be very honest, we had some folks in the past who were sending their nomination to the regional fellow, a week before it was due, and that's the first time the regional fellows were seeing these nominations. And that's asking a lot to have somebody review it, provide feedback, in a week's time. So this was our way to kind of help with that. And I think last year it worked great. We didn't get any negative feedback on it. So it is really up to the regional fellows to say, yeah, this is 50%. The intent there is for the regional fellow to say, you know what, I think this packet is far enough along that it's in good shape. This person has started putting enough thought into this. So that's the reason for that date. August 10th is when the regional fellows need to submit that list to the national office. This is just a list. We don't need to see the actual nominations. Any nomination that's received at the October deadline must be on that August list. If they are not, the packet will not be moved through. So that is a hard date, is the August date to get the list of nominations to the national office. August 27th and September 17th. Again, very honest here. Those two are the two dates to me that I feel are need the most discussion. So the intent there is that nominees are to get their complete draft packet to the regional fellow point of contact. September 17th, regional fellow point of contact gets their input back. Those 2 dates are really only for planning. The national office is not involved. We don't need to see draft packets. We don't need to see comments, none of that. That is just to kind of help the regional fellows kind of define the process a little more and know, okay, this is the time frame that I have that I'm going to need to get these reviews done. October 1, complete packets are due to the national office. And then, again, we'll talk about what happens after that later in the presentation, but October 1 until December 31st, that's the rest of the review process. So really the hard dates are getting your draft packet, your 50% draft in so that it's on that list, and then October 1 completed packet. So those are the 2 dates that are hard dates. Last year, I will tell you, we did have to turn a couple people away because they weren't on that August list, and that was really crummy. But I tell you what, it helped to be able to say, hey, we have this date, we're sticking to it. And I think it really made our process a lot more transparent and in the end, a lot better. So next slide, please. This is what we're going to be talking about today. One slide on fellows' role, and then really it's the nomination form and the process. Those are the two things that we want to go through to make sure everybody understands what the process is, make sure it's transparent, and make sure that you guys are ready, you know, to get these nomination packets in. Next slide. Fellows charge. So, you know, this is one of those, I think that for me, this one is very personal. These are the different parts to the charge that you take when you become a fellow. The key was when I, at our fellows luncheon, I remember sitting there and they told us, they said, you know, becoming fellow is not the end of your career. It's not, oh, I've worked so hard in SAME and I made it. I got it. I'm going to check this box and I'm checking out. When you become a fellow, you really are recommitting to SAME. We need fellows. We need folks with more experience to be able to do these things that are listed in the charge. So that's something that I think over the years, you know, we've really tried to convey that more and more. I think I've heard that in most of the last fellows classes that were inducted. Again, you really are committing to being involved. And that is kind of one of the keys that we've tried to work into the nomination form moving, I guess, over the past couple of years, really making it so that we can help gauge that commitment from people. Next slide. So the actual form, again, we do an after action review. We, within the executive committee, and then we reach out to regional fellows, RVPs, you know, different groups like that. There were two areas this year that we really felt needed a little better definition, not necessarily changes, but something that the amount of discussion that we had at our level made us realize, wow, if we aren't even really all on the same page, we need to make sure that we can get on the same page and convey this information. So the two things that I've had listed here, 10 years of membership versus 10 years of service. So 10 years of SAME membership, that is a go, no-go criteria. That is something that the national office, they will check that, and if that is not met, then a packet is not in the running anymore. 10 years of service, that is really the key to, we'll talk about it later, criteria 2B, telling us what your involvement in SAME has been. And I'll tell you, we spent so many hours going around talking about active engagement versus service versus, you know, the different terminology. We were all saying the same thing. It was a matter of how do we put this in writing? How do we make this clear in the nomination form? So again, when we get to that part of the presentation, we'll go through kind of the language that we've added to clarify that. But again, that's not a change. It's just something that we've tried to clarify with the language this year. Impact, you know, this is a big one. One of the things that I've always liked the way that this was explained to me. You can write this great fellows nomination packet that says you did this, this, and this, but so what? So the impact is the so what to what you've done. Tell us what impact that had. And again, that isn't anything new. We've always looked for that, but the way that we have the nomination form structured this year makes that very clear how we want that conveyed. Kathy, do we have any questions in the chat yet?
We have a comment from Jim Donahue, I believe, that requiring the RFPOC to provide an endorsement is a conflict of interest. For example, feedback was provided to the nominee and nominator at 50% stage. However, the advice is not taken, so the final package is deficient. The RFPOC is placed in a tough spot. Are you supposed to be honest and say that the nomination is not strong enough to support the nominee for fellow? Also, is it required that POC provide feedback twice, at 50% stage and again at the 100% stage before the packet is submitted to national?
Okay, Jim, I will give you, this is opinion of Ann AV. So obviously I haven't consulted the whole executive committee on this. That is a tough to be in. And yes, that is the intent. I think I actually have that in a slide a little ways throughout the presentation. As a regional fellows point of contact, you doing an endorsement is saying that you agree with the nomination. So again, no way around it. Yes, it is a tough spot to be in, but that is the intent. So let's move on. And like I said, it does come up later. If we need to address it some more though at the end, I'm definitely happy to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to get into the actual nomination form. So the actual criteria that are scored in the nomination. Item number 1, pretty straightforward. This information has to enter your SAME record. That's on record with the national office. 10 years of membership. Again, the national office will check this, and if you don't have 10 years, it's a no-go. This is one of those that sometimes people's membership records can get kind of wonky because of moves, name changes, any number of reasons. So please do not hesitate. Reach out in advance. Don't wait until the day before. This is something, if you need a little more information, a little more write-up in your nomination to explain, one of those wonky memberships, that's fine. But let's look at that in advance so that you know what you're dealing with. We don't want to see something kick back, after all that work has been put into it. Next slide. So this is I guess, as I would think of it, this is the meat of your nomination. This is what have you done in SAME? What's your so what? So this is where you'll see a little different format in the way that it's actually presented. But again, the information that we're asking for has not changed for this criteria. What you're going to see is 2A, criteria 2A is a single bulleted list of your SAME involvement. So it is very key, and this is in the nomination form, but it is key that you understand this involves post-level, regional, national, elected, volunteer, any type of SAME involvement. We specified this year a single bulleted list. What we've seen in the past is somebody might have, here's my list of SAME involvement for the Kansas City Post, and here it is for the National, and here it is for the Kitty Hawk Post. So we want to see all of your SAME involvement in a single list. 2B, this is your detailed expansion of the items in 2A. And as you'll see, this criteria is worth 35 points. So that is the most of any of the criteria in the nomination. What we've done, and if you go back and look, I think the language last year, it was in the description on the nomination form, but not laid out the way we have it now. So when you're looking at the nomination form, you will see for 2B, challenge, effort, impact, We really want to see it in that format, and I'll tell you why. Too often we have folks who have great information, the content is good, but it is written in such a way that it is so hard to follow and so hard to pick out what they're talking about or what relates to something else, that unfortunately somebody might not get full credit for what they've done because we just can't decipher the way it's written. So again, this was not made to make it more difficult. We really are hoping that this makes it easier for you. I think the big thing is, for us, we're hoping that this can bring more consistency. Again, we want to be able to look at the content and not get wrapped up on the format that something's presented in. Last bullet here, this is where that 10 years of service comes in. And again, we have struggled with involved service, engaged, active. It all pretty much means the same thing. We want to know that you have been doing, not that it's not important, but more than just going to meetings. Going to meetings and supporting your post is wonderful, but we want to see that somebody has contributed in some way? Have they, and it doesn't have to be as post president. It doesn't have to be as a director. It can literally be anything that you've done at any level of SAME, but we really want to see something besides just showing up. Next, Kathy, if you can go to the next slide, this is just an example. Lots of words on here, but I wanted to get it all on one page so that you could see this was an example of a nomination. This was how someone last year presented challenge, effort, impact. So again, you've got to watch that word limit. So you do have that restriction, but this made it very easy for us to see, okay, this is what this person is telling us they did. This impact at the bottom of the screen, that's their so what. That's really the impact that they've made. So again, that really isn't a change to anything in criteria 2A or 2B, but the way that one looks is probably the most different out of any of the criteria. So I have not read any of the chat, but it looks like there is a lot going on. Kathy, do we need to stop for anything?
Yeah, there's a couple questions, and so one question, which I think I answered, but if you would answer as well, if post-level engagement is all the nominee has, is that a disqualifier?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I will, again, just personal experience, until I really got involved, I had a lot of questions about the process. I don't want that to be the case with anybody. I want you to ask questions, and again, we want it to be transparent. There is no requirement to be post-president. That's probably the one that we get the most. There is no requirement to have national involvement, to be on your board. There literally is not anything that you have to have except for 10 years of membership and 10 years of involved service. The way that the scoring works, those 35 points, you would, and again, it's somewhat subjective, and we're really trying to allow for enough subjectivity, but make things consistent enough. So the way we have that written, if you show that you've been involved at national, post, and regional level, and you've been all sorts of officers and board members and committee members, that's probably going to get you more points, but there's absolutely nothing that says that you have to have any specific thing. So hopefully that helps. What else?
And another question is, how should the bulleted list be organized? Should it be chronological? If somebody is holding multiple positions simultaneously, do they go on separate bullets?
I believe, and I apologize, I don't have that in front of me. I think we did say chronological order, though. Do you recall, Kathy?
Yes, I think the form makes it clear that it should be in chronological order.
Yeah, yep.
Another question is, do you have to provide a response for every position bulleted? So
yes, and that is, I know we have that language in there. For every item in 2A, you have to have something in 2B. You can include some more information in 2B, I guess in theory. I don't know why or how that would work. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but we do say that if you list it in 2A, you got to tell us in 2B what, give us the details of it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the intent of that was to prevent people from just listing positions without any qualifiers or impact.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So another question is, we provide service through our companies and individually. Do they need to include company engagement in addition to individual service and engagement?
If it is something that you are doing, I would include it, whether it's on behalf of your company or personally. If you're the one doing it, yes. I think that's what you mean by that question. The only other thing would be, if you're the president of a company and you have a project manager that you have off doing stuff, you can't take credit for the positions that that person holds. But yeah, if you're doing it, definitely take credit for that.
And looks like last question is how are the 10 years of service communicated? So, I mean, I think that's through the chronological list, correct?
Right. Yep. So we literally do go through and add up. We say, okay, we'll look at the list in 2A and say, okay, they were a board member for 2 years, and then they were volunteered on this committee for a year here, and maybe it's a year here. We actually go through and we will add it up and make sure that it, it doesn't have to be consecutive. We'll make sure that there's 10 years of involvement there. Okay. Okay, I think we're good. So let's go on to 3A, 3B. Very similar to 2A, 2B, except for this is your professional involvement, your industry involvement. Same thing. 3A, we want to see a bulleted list of what you've done with the profession. And again, there's a lot better explanation of that on the actual nomination form. And then 3B is the list or the details of the list in 3A. So same format, challenge, effort, impact. One thing that, again, this is not a change, but I really want to point out, this can include or should include civic involvement. If you do things outside of work, that relate to the profession or our industry at all, include those, whether it's your church or Boy Scouts or anything outside of SAME and your work, all of that can be included. Okay, next slide. Item 4 is awards and citations. This is only worth 5 points. Include anything at all. SAME, civic, professional, anything. You don't have to go into a lot of detail. One of the nice things, I don't know a lot about all of the different military awards, but I'm sitting next to Rad at the table when we do our consensus maybe, and Rad can explain them. We don't really dig into, oh, well, what exactly was this award for and things like that. We just want to see what type of awards or citations you've received. Society knowledge, number 5. So this is one that we added, gosh, I don't even know if it was a year or 2 ago. Overall, we haven't changed really the intent of it. We've just changed the questions. This is literally a little, I guess, test, I would say, to talk about your society knowledge. All of the questions can be answered with information on the website. It's worth 15 points, but please do not cut and paste from the website. I don't know, last year, the past couple of years, we've had the question, how do you change your membership record? Well, don't go onto the website, cut and paste the figure, the picture, and paste it into your nomination. And this is one, every year while we're doing these, we get somebody that asks the question, how do I change my membership record? Well, that was one of the questions that you just answered on the test. So that's why we're saying, please don't cut and paste. We want you to read it and look it up. Again, all of the information is out there on the website. Let's see. Gwen, I saw a question come in. 3B, how is 3B scored if a nominee only shows their work effort compared to showing their impact of service to the engineering profession? I think Gwen, I'm not sure if I'm reading it right, so we can definitely talk offline if need be. We are wanting you to show impact to the engineering profession, not necessarily just what you do when you go to work from 8 to 5 every day. So hopefully that answers it, but if not, we can circle back. Okay, let's go on to the criteria number 6, future fellows role. This is another one, again, unchanged from the past couple of years, but it is new, within the past few years. This really ties back to the whole question about What are you going to do once you become a fellow? What are you going to do to stay involved? There's two parts to it. There's your passion and your commitment. Each one is only one sentence. What I would say is when you're thinking about what is your passion, not saying this is not your true passion, but it's easy to just say mentoring or STEM, veteran support, things like that. But just remember that every single person putting in a nomination packet is going to be answering this. So what's going to show the committee that you really have a passion for something specific, that you thought about this one? Again, like we say on here, what will demonstrate that you've put thought into this question? The second sentence is your commitment. How are you going to translate that passion to action? It must be actionable, meaning, and I hesitated to put this into the actual slides, but what we don't want to see is my passion is mentoring. My commitment is I'm going to mentor people in my post. Okay, that's wonderful. And again, I'm not discouraging that, but give us some more information here that will help us give more points in this criteria. Okay, next slide. So this should be the last one for the actual nomination form. Item number 7 is citation. No points here. This is just the citation that we use at the ceremony. And then number 8, the endorsements. Endorsements are always a source of confusion. So you have 4 required endorsements. The nominator, that must be a fellow, regional fellows point of contact, RVP, and your post president. Those 4 have to be included. Those are a go, no go. We really struggled with this one for a few years, just to be honest. What if I have Rad write me an endorsement, and Rad is great with words and he puts a ton of time into my endorsement and it just looks great. And then I ask Mark, and Mark's super busy that week and it just doesn't sound as good. Well, it's unfortunate if I were to get docked points because of that. So that's really why we've gone here to, we aren't putting individual scores to the endorsements. It is a go, no go if for those 4 endorsements. And again, this is where I would say, and it comes up one more time, getting back to, I believe it was Jim's question about the endorsements. All I can say is you're the one putting your name, you're signing that endorsement. So make sure that you're good with it. Okay, I think we can move on to review phases. That is the last piece for today. So all of that was kind of talking about the actual nomination, the different pieces to the nomination. Now we're going to go through the review phases. And again, we have the phased approach that we've had for the past few years, very slight tweaks to it, but this really was mostly in response to feedback that we got from our after action reviews. So phase 1, and I'll be very honest, phase 1 is to me the most confusing. Phase 1 is everything leading up to when your actual nomination is formally submitted. Phase 1 is where you have heavy involvement by your regional fellows point of contacts. Regional fellows are looking at 2 things. They are looking to make sure that your format is correct. Did you put 2A and 2B in the challenge effort impact format? Things like that. And then the second part of that is the actual content. The regional fellows are looking at the content. They might be able to make suggestions about, I think you should have a little more post involvement. Now, what I will say, we are asking the regional fellows, if a nomination does not meet the format, do not pass it on. It is deferred. That is a pretty strong one there. Whereas providing feedback and on the actual content, that one's a lot more subjective. So a regional fellow might say, man, the packet's good. I think it could have a little more strength here, but in that case, I would suggest that you do pass it on, because it is subjective, and the actual full review by the executive committee, we can look at that in more detail. So if you'll remember, in the past, regional fellows were asked to review every nomination in full. We are not doing that anymore as far as them providing actual scores and feedback. So phase 2. And I guess, again, going back, so phase 1 is your getting your 50% drafted, getting the input from the regional fellow. All of that is phase 1. Phase 2 is once it's actually submitted to the national office. And again, those are due in October, but do not hesitate to submit it early. One of the things that we changed, I think just last year was the first year, we want your nomination packet in a single PDF file in a certain order with a certain file name. That may sound really picky, but you've got plenty of time to get it in that format. So I would suggest not waiting. That October date is a hard date, and I'm not going to let Kathy be put in a bad spot where somebody says, oh man, sorry, my computer is having computer problems and I couldn't convert the file to PDF. It's a hard date. So let's not get in that situation. Let's make sure that, files are combined, files are uploaded, all of that plenty early. Kathy, is there a date that they can start submitting, or is that open already?
It's open already. It's open already, but
okay.
I would probably contact somebody that submitted and make sure that they've actually
right. Okay. So you don't have to wait though for. I mean, if you get your nomination packet to your regional fellow, you've coordinated with them, and you guys both agree it's ready, mid-August. Go ahead and get it in. So.
Correct.
Okay. Perfect. Next slide, please. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, phase 3. Sorry. Okay, so phase 3, this is the full review by the executive committee. I think it's one slide, back one slide. There we go. Okay. This has not changed, but just to let you guys know what we do, everybody on the executive committee, we read through every single page of every single nomination. We have a matrix that we each individually fill out, and then Kathy is kind enough to combine all of those for us, and then we sit down in a room together, and we have a wonderful time hashing out all the details of these nominations, and we leave that room with consensus on every single package. So rest assured that when you submit, it is getting looked at. We are doing a thorough review. Next slide. A little bit more information on phase 3. So again, some of the parts of the evaluation are subjective. Two of the things that we've kind of done to help with that, again, we want to allow subjectivity, but we want some consistency. So the executive committee, we have a mandatory kickoff meeting before we start reviewing nominations. And basically what we do, we go through the nomination form, we go through and talk about, okay, this is what we mean by active service, or this is what we mean by involved service. We talk all of that through before we do our reviews. And then again, we sit in that room together and we come to a consensus. Next slide. This is the last phase. The way that it works is when we leave that room, we have consensus on every nomination package. The Academy of Fellows chair will submit our recommendation to the SAME president. At that time, then the SAME president has some flexibility. They review. I will tell you that especially any nominations that are deferred, they look at those closely, make sure that they don't have questions, or make sure that they're comfortable with that. The national leadership team, the vice presidents, can be consulted. And then selects and non-selects are notified by the end of December. So timing wise, you've got phase 1 going on, up until the nominations are submitted October 1st. You've got phase 2, which is the headquarters doing their review. That's pretty quick. That's, the first week in October. Phase 3, which is the full review, that's usually October, November. Sometimes we go into early December by the time we get that consensus meeting scheduled. And then phase 4 is wrapping up in December. So everything is done by the end of December. And next slide. These are miscellaneous thoughts from Ann Avey. These are some things that I think are important to know. Like Mark said early on, we are wanting to bring in a strong group of fellows to add to our resource. We really do want to strengthen the society. So we are here for any questions, any specific situations you might have. A lot of times, every year we're going to have questions about, well, what if I'm the RVP and the regional fellow, or what if my post president is unavailable? Things like that. If you have something specific, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We want to help everybody figure out this process. Format and word count. Again, the reason that we are doing this is because there is good content and we don't want it to get lost in the formatting. I always, on all of my projects, I'm really picky with the little details, everything from spelling to schedule, just the little things. And sometimes when people say, my gosh, this is a $40 million environmental remediation, why are you worried about the little things? I need to know that you can do the little things to have confidence in your big work. So that's kind of why we're looking at those little things. We don't want those to get in the way of really the meat of the nomination. Packets not meeting those basic requirements. Again, we have asked the regional fellows to not pass those nominations on. And then really, I couldn't figure out how to word this last bullet. What we're trying to say is, what have you done in the past for SAME, and what are you going to do in the future? Those are really what we're hoping we can get that from reading your nomination packet. Kathy, I think that might be our last slide. Call Kathy if you have any questions. Okay, so that is all that we have to present. Let's go through some questions.
Yeah, and there were a couple that I want to make sure that you reiterate. I've been trying to answer, but some that I want to make sure that you talk about. So one was there's nothing anywhere that says that a post can only submit one nomination per post.
Correct. Yep.
Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Yep. That's one, just like, for example, I'm with the Greater Kansas City Post. We have a very involved council of fellows, which is our Greater Kansas City Post fellows. So we have a system where we help people with their nominations. We help them, 3-5 years out, start doing what they need to do to be ready to put in a nomination. But even then, we always want to make it clear, you don't even need us. Anyone can put in a nomination on their own as long as they have those endorsements.
Great. And then somebody asked if there was a minimum on, for example, the percentages that are listed per section. And my understanding is there's no minimum, but the lower your percentages, the less competitive it will be.
Right, correct. So again, we all do our individual matrix, and it has, trying to think, it has the fellow's name down one side. It has our individual score for each criteria, a total score. Kathy tabulates those. What we do then is we look at this ginormous matrix, but we do not say, okay, 60%, all of those and below, we aren't even looking at them, or 60 points. So we look at every nomination. There usually is some natural breaks, but again, that is not something that we have in writing anywhere that we I guess have set.
And then somebody asked, do we recommend whether the nominator or the nominee contacts the three individuals providing the endorsements? My personal thought is that it should be the nominee, but it's not written anywhere that it has to be the nominee or the nominator.
Right. Yep, agree.
I think that's pretty much it. I think I was able to answer other questions, but
it looks like there's one last one from Mr. Cook. No minimum or maximum number of fellows. Nope. No minimum set of points. Nope. We're good. One of the things that I always worried about, again, I wasn't really sure about the process when I put in. So I was worried, okay, what if there's something wrong with my nomination? What if when I submit it, something looks, something with the computer, it screws up things and the format's all crazy, or is it going to get kicked back? I will tell you, not much is automated here. We do, Kathy is looking at these, we are all looking at these. So again, anything that you have questions on, we can help you out. We can figure a way, to get things submitted in the right format. So don't hesitate to let us know. So if there are any other questions, I don't see any coming in on the chat. Kathy, where is this, or how is this available? Will folks go to the Fellows webpage, or will it be sent out via email?
So it will be posted on the How to Nominate a Fellow webpage, which is kind of a sub-page of the AOF webpage, along with the recording.
Okay. Perfect. So going once, going twice, any last questions? Mark, do you have any closeout comments for us? I don't want to put you on the spot, but anything we've talked about in the last 50 minutes that you'd like to comment on?
No, not a problem. I again, Anne, just my hat's off to you because you did a great job covering all the material. And I think one of Anne's points is, this provides you a basic understanding of what is expected in the fellows process. But as you go through that process, your regional fellow POCs and your nominators are great people to talk to who have been through that process before. But again, for those regional fellow POCs, any of the nominees and nominators, if you do have questions, please reach out to us. We'd like to answer those ahead of time because we know it can be a little bit daunting when you look at that whole package. But I'd offer start early and communicate with the folks that you're working with, your regional fellow POCs and your nominators. And it is, we talk about it's really about a future commitment. And I saw Jim Donahue's note in there, and obviously, make that from your heart because, this is something that you're going to follow through with. But we've always found that if you make that commitment and you make it in writing, you're much more likely to fulfill it. And the real benefit of being a fellow is serving as a fellow once you make fellow. I mean, it'll be, we do a great job in investiture, and it is an honor for sure, and we appreciate what everybody has done to support our society. But the greatest reward to you is when you are out there serving the society as a fellow, because you are that person who has that experience and has that long-term commitment to help our society. So again, Anne, thanks very much. Again, you knocked it out of the park with this. I know I can tell that you're a seasoned veteran at it. But again, thanks for putting all this together and making this available to everybody. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. And again, we appreciate all of your time. Don't hesitate to pass this on to anybody at all that you think might be interested this year or in future years for the Fellows nomination. So, thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.